Talk about the challenges of mental health. In this series I have called How Do You Feel? And this morning I want to focus in on our struggle with anxiety. As I mentioned before, there's been a lot of research done across congregations in this country, and by far the number one mental health challenge that is identified is the challenge of anxiety. This series is predicated on the truth that not talking about mental health is not working. So I'm trying to do that, and it might be unusual to some. I have never had more people tell me, I've never heard any sermons like this before. I'm choosing to take that as a compliment. But I believe that this is an area that we have ignored for far too long. I don't pretend to be any kind of mental health expert, but I do want to bless this church with encouraging us to consider this area and how important it is in life. I believe very deeply in the fact that God made us to have feelings, and God doesn't make mistakes. What is worship without feelings? What is marriage, for better or for worse, without feelings? What is love, encouragement, joy within a church family without feelings? How do we rejoice with those who rejoice and mourn with those who mourn without feelings? And yet there are times when our feelings can immobilize us. We go through many storms in life, and sometimes hard to understand feelings are part of the storm damage that is left behind. Anxiety can take many different forms, from insomnia to panic attacks to increased nervousness, fear, out of control, worry, an increased sense of doom and pessimism. It can also affect our capacity to concentrate. It can bring on all kinds of phobias, a myriad of other physiological and psychological kinds of behaviors. Anxiety is real. So as the Lord's people, we need to remove the stigma of anxiety. We should resist the common thinking that anxiety is only for the weak or for those who have little faith. That is a lie. I was struck by a statement that Frederick Backman wrote in his book called Anxious People. He says rather early on in the book, in many ways, people would get more sympathy and support from their co-workers and bosses if when they showed up for work some morning looking all haggard and told them they were just hung over, rather than saying they were struggling with anxiety. So this morning I must say the following. Number one, many Christians are incorrectly taught that all anxiety is sin. But in reality, anxiety begins as a signal. Sometimes anxiety signals to us discomfort. Sometimes it might make us want to hide. Sometimes it is rooted in an overwhelming sense of guilt. Sometimes it signals danger. Sometimes our feelings shout, hey, over here. And all of that is not bad. In fact, there could be a lot of good reasons for that. For example, if I was to suddenly see a child playing in the street and a car just rounding the corner, I would feel fear and a big injection of adrenaline. I would move faster than what you would think possible to move toward that child. When a loved one dies unexpectedly, I feel immense guilt. And yet that is healthy, because that guilt can be used to eventually gain perspective and even a degree of understanding. I might someday be told by a doctor, I have cancer. A lot of you have already had that experience. And when you are told you have cancer, it is natural to feel anxious, to even be afraid. But you can use those feelings eventually to gain perspective and peace. I have seen many members of this church family take that journey to peace and contentment. Feelings are not inherently bad things. I feel anxiety because Sunday seems to come every week. And there are times when I realize early in the week I'm nowhere near ready. I have great anxiety. I have never gotten over the nervousness of standing here. I want the Lord to come quickly. I've never wanted Him to come more quickly than on Saturday nights. But my anxiety has caused me to get better organized and to have greater discipline so that I am at least more certain of what I want to try to do as soon in the week as possible so that I can have a sense of peace about doing this. My anxiety motivates me. It seems to me that it is impossible to be a fully functioning human being without feeling anxiousness concerning something or someone at some time. And if you care about anyone or anything, you will face anxiety. If you have never experienced anxiety in your life, you're not only not normal, something's wrong with you. All of us who do feel anxiety from time to time, well, that's normal. You're not weird. You're not the exception. The key is to read the signals. What are we advocating here? That we shouldn't be people who care? I hope not. But we need to understand what anxiety can signal for our life. And that leads me to the second thing. The key is anxiety can be productive or paralyzing depending on what you do with the signals. Anxiety is a warning light on the dashboard of life. Just like hoping your check engine light will eventually go away if you ignore it long enough. It's not a good life strategy. And so it's important for us to understand that we need to read the warning lights in our life. Jesus warns about several problems in Luke 21. And among those, he says, be careful or your hearts will be weighed down with the anxieties of life. It's the weighing down. It's that sense that our feet are getting stuck in the concrete, that we're not being able to move forward in a productive way. That's the danger in not addressing anxiety. Jesus never says anxiety is a sin. It would have been weird for him to say so because he felt some anxiety about going to the cross. He experienced anxiety in his life, but yet he did not sin. Remember that. The problem is not feeling anxious, but refusing to address it. That's where it can become dangerous. Paul said this about anger in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 26. Be angry and sin not. Do not let the sun go down on your anger. I believe that Jesus felt frustration and anger. A lot of times the disciples just didn't get the point and did the very opposite of what Jesus was hoping that they would do. When Jesus cleaned out the money changers in the temple, he didn't do that laughing. He was upset. Anger is something that all of us will experience if we're a fully functioning person. The key is that we not wallow in it, that we not invite it to stay, that we not nurse it like restoking a dwindling campfire. Because to do that, it can easily turn into bitterness or violence or hateful language. And that's where the sin comes in. And so you have to recognize when you're angry, and that needs to be addressed in some sort of constructive way. I wish the Bible said that about anxiety. But the problem is, anxiety, there's not really a Greek word for it. Tell me if you've heard this passage, Philippians 4:6. The NIV translates it, do not be anxious about anything. It almost preaches itself. Paul commanded, do not be anxious. You feel anxiety, therefore you have broken that command and you have sinned. Ever heard a sermon like that? I have a feeling I might have preached a sermon like that at some time or another, but I finally dug into the original language in the text. The term that gets translated anxiety in modern translations, it's the term for cares. You know what Philippians 4:6 says? Literally, be careful how you care. Be careful how you care in terms of all things. And it's the idea that we're going to care. We're not bad or evil because we care, but we should be careful how we do that. I sometimes batter the King James a lot of times in its translation. Here the King James got it right. You look up Philippians 4:6 in the King James and it will talk about cares. It's interesting to me that Jesus tells a parable that has to do with sowing the seed. And he says in Matthew 13:22 that some of the seed was sown among the thorns, and the cares of this life choked it out. And that's the same term that's often translated anxiety in various modern translations. The cares of this life. You see, the Bible teaches that we need to be discerning about our cares. And so what do we do with our cares? Well, we can ask, why do we have these cares? We can ask, can we give these cares to God? We can ask, what part of my caring can I control so it doesn't get out of hand? We can ask, how do my cares intersect with the wisdom of God. We can ask, am I so impaired by my cares that I need medical assistance? Can I trust somebody in which I can explore my cares? Now, all of those, and there are many other kinds of questions that we can ask when we're analyzing our care. And we need to analyze them. We need to ask ourselves why we care about some things so passionately. Is that from the world? Or is that from God? And that leads me to the third point. We often need help in sorting through our cares so that we will better understand them and know what to do with them. We are not alone, and we shouldn't act that way. We shouldn't act like we are alone, because we're not. If your check engine light has been on for a long time, it can cause real damage to you. It can cause real damage to your relationships. It can crush you spiritually. It could stunt your capacity to trust God. Please do not allow yourself to always fly solo. There are people in this church family who are currently hiding from this church family. Now you explain that. How is it so often the case where a Christian who has never needed the involvement of the church family in their life more than the time they are in, and that's the time when they stay away? How do you explain that? And it's like they're going to stay away until they get everything together, and then once they do, they can come back and say, I'm fine, thank you. When we are trying to sort out anxieties and our cares and trying to discover the why, we've never needed one another more. And I think it's that little voice again that I talked about last week that keeps whispering to us, if you say something, you're going to be embarrassed. If you let people know what you feel, they're going to look down on you. If you go forward and ask for prayers, oh, that'll be embarrassing. And it's that little voice that you hear over and over and over again that stops you from taking advantage of what God has provided us in this church family. And honestly, I believe that's an evil voice. And I would encourage us not to pay attention to it, but at the same time, I know how easy it is, even in my own life. And so God tells Joshua in Joshua 1:9, have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous? Do not be terrified. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Our youngest son, he was always a little bit more on the emotional scale, and he was very nervous during storms. And we were in Texas at times, and at times the thunder rolls in really loud, and the wind is so strong. And then there's the reality we live in Tornado Alley, and the rain's coming down so much, it's coming down sideways almost is what it feels like, beating against the house. And our little boy, he'd come into the bedroom in the wee hours of the morning and say, I'm scared. And of course, I told him to suck it up, get back to his room, and become a man. No, of course not. You know, we held him, we hugged him, we told him that we were there with him and that we weren't going to let anything bad happen to him. And that's what's supposed to happen. He felt this kind of emotion that just frightening. And he tried to do something about it by going to the ones he knew who loved him. And we can still do that, you and I. God told Isaiah in Isaiah 41, I am the Lord your God who takes hold of your right hand and says to you, do not fear, I will help you. No one who belongs to the Lord is left alone. No one who belongs to the Lord is without opportunity to seek God's encouragement embodied by the people of God. What is our greatest goal in life as Christians? I hope it is to become more like Jesus day by day. And the body of Christ is the embodiment of Jesus in this time and in this place. You can experience the love of God and the love of Jesus in part by how your brothers and sisters in Christ love you. And we will hug you and tell you that we love you and tell you that as much as it depends upon us, we're not going to allow anything bad to happen to you. I don't know of anyone in this room who has a secret agenda that involves destroying somebody, also in this room. I don't know of a single person who's like, man, if I could really do something that would cause them great harm because I want to get back at them for something they did years ago to me. I don't know of anybody here that thinks like that. I can't tell you how rare that is to be able to say that about a church. But that is the truth, I believe, about us. None of us wish harm on anyone else here. We want to bless everyone here the best we can. We want people to see Jesus through us. We want people to be touched by Jesus through us. We want people to know the assurance of Jesus by how we relate to one another. Who doesn't need that at some time in their life? A church family represents who Jesus promises to be through our conversations and our prayers and our love and our encouragement. The question is, will you let us in? And that leads me to the last point. I want you to know this morning, it is okay to not always be okay and need medical assistance. It is far better to admit your needs that anxiety has produced in your life than it is to try to hide from them. If you ask most any doctor who has a general practice, they will tell you the great majority of their patients, I've had some tell me 75, 80% of their patients are seeking assistance for some mental health challenge. And so when you're having difficulties, you're so normal. You're not weird. And this congregation believes that doctors and medicines and therapies are part of the mercies of God. And that's why I keep reminding us week in and week out that we support you in getting that kind of help if you are in need. If your insurance won't pay for it and you can't afford it, we will take care of the first amount of time, the first 6 weeks to get you started. We want to help. Anxiety disorders can run from very mild to very serious. And the church is not a substitute for professional therapy and needed medications. Here's what I really want you to understand this morning. You don't have to feel shame because you're struggling here. You are not less because you struggle with anxiety more than some. It's so important that we are willing to be open to the help of others. It's amazing how just a decent, honest conversation can be so affirming and valuable to a person who's struggling. They've allowed things to build up on the inside, and they don't think anybody will understand, and everyone will think something negative about me, and so they keep it bottled up until it explodes. Don't explode. Seek help early. Even just a good conversation with somebody you trust, who will listen, who will affirm your value, who will pray for you. You see, God has placed us in a community of faith for our benefit and for God's purpose. And it takes courage to say out loud what so many already suspect. For you to say, I am not okay, and I do not want to stay this way. It's hard to do because built into our anxiety is the anxiety of talking about our anxieties. And that's true. That is a scientific fact. That is something that has been measured down through decades of research. A lot of us cannot manage our anxiety because we are too anxious to talk to somebody about our anxiety. But Jesus says the truth will set you free. That little voice inside us over and over again will talk about how I need to just keep quiet about what's going on inside of me. That is a lie. I hope, I pray, I encourage that we be the kind of church that makes that statement in Romans 12 true. That each of us belong to one another. It's not like, well, you stay out of my life is none of your business. That's not what the Bible says. We each belong to one another. I think that's about verse 5 in Romans chapter 12. I long for a time when these great statements from Romans 12 are true for all of us. Beginning in verse 9, love must be sincere. Hate what is evil. Cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with the Lord's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Mourn with those who mourn. Live in harmony with one another. And so here's another opportunity. We sing a song of invitation after the message to provide this opportunity. Anyone here who has a spiritual need, anyone here who has any kind of need that we might assist with or help with, one of the most powerful things a person can do is say out loud what they're struggling with. And we will love you. We will encourage you. We will pray with you. And if that doesn't make you have a little bit more hope, then I don't know what we're doing here.